What's going on, Digital Wildcatters? Welcome to a very special episode. This is the most people we've ever had on a podcast, so setting fucking world records over here on oil and gas startups. Gonna give an intro, probably the longest intro that we've had, so bear with me. We have Adam from One Map Minerals. We have Ricky from Apache. We have the infamous Ashley Gilmore from Tracts. Have Britton from Satya Royalties. We have Whitney from Flat River Minerals and Mac from Tracts. Everyone's in town for NAPE. Whitney's flexing on us because she got the presidential suite at Marriott Marquis. And so we're just the peons along for the ride today. But really interesting conversation that we're going to have today, talking about the future of land in tech, in oil and gas. So everyone has a background in land and minerals. Y'all might not know it, but I did a 2-week stint as a landman back in 2011, and I hated it and went back to roughnecking. So I don't know how people sit in a courthouse and actually run title, but I want to kick off this episode with, let's talk about how things have changed post COVID in 2020, either from a mineral buying perspective, what the market looks like, the technology that's being utilized. Obviously things shut down in 2020. Since then, we've really had a demand for oil and gas. Activity has picked up, and would love to hear how things have changed pre-2020 and post-2020, and then we can just dive into things from there. Who wants to take the lead? Whitney. Ashley pointed to you.
Things have changed from the mineral buying standpoint, from the technology standpoint.
Yeah, both.
Or all the
yeah,
above.
we can talk macro, how things have changed from like a business model and operating perspective, and then we'll dive into the tech side of it too.
Yeah, sure. We really enjoyed the COVID period of not living, but of mineral buying. Things kind of slowed down a bit. Obviously, prices were depressed, and we were really successful. And it also gave us an opportunity to really spend a lot of time perfecting what we have built via Salesforce. We have kind of an acquisition machine that we've built out in Salesforce, and have spent quite a lot of time building. Actually, the first step of that whole process is actually Tracts. And I'm not plugging Ashley just because he's here.
That's why Ashley put this podcast together, isn't it?
Hey, you guys don't have to talk about Tracts. Is there any other tools that are as useful?
Yeah, but we like to think of ourselves as not only a mineral company, but a technology company. We have a pretty complex matrix of different softwares and technologies we use and try to integrate with one another to drive synergies and cut costs and, create, some competitive advantages. So we just continue to try to evolve and stay ahead, of the times and use whatever we can to drive those efficiencies.
I mean, it wasn't long ago that like mineral funds had just boiler rooms of interns or junior land assistants just making calls to mineral owners, right? And I'd see people like using Excel spreadsheets and things like that. I mean, you're just talking about like 2018, 2019 timeframe. Have things changed where people are thinking about tech stacks more and how to actually, because like building out on Salesforce, I mean,
yeah. So we started in Rockin' WW in 19, so we kind of started there. And when you look at what we've built the past couple of years in Salesforce, it's pretty incredible. From the acquisition standpoint, like you were saying, we've got all of our leads in there. They're immediately assigned to a buyer. Buyers calling on them. We've got dashboards that we look at monthly that track last 7-day activity, so we can get as granular as how many seconds were you on the phone with somebody? How many calls did you get back? How many seconds were those calls? How many voicemails were left versus calls answered? The texts they send, we can actually read them. So we can really track stats and see, what drives success or what is potentially leads to success. How many touches or how many calls does it take to get a deal under contract? Those kind of things. So those stats are incredibly useful that obviously we didn't have access to pre-technology.
See, this is great. So Whitney's giving me all the tips that I need. So actually it's interesting because to hear Whitney talk, Sitio is a big company, right? Well, we're getting bigger, but we just took over or just did the merger with Brigham, which has been really interesting because Brigham, everybody knows they were very good at their ground game. A lot of what like Whitney does, and a lot of other mineral players out there. And the CTO, our approach has been a very different approach. We kind of looked at the ground game deal for a little bit, but ultimately we found our strength was in kind of becoming an aggregator, and that was kind of the start. So the technology that we've used we've been a little slower on it in some ways, but we've been very quick on the data side. Like as a minerals company, we're very data heavy, but our focus is different than like what Whitney's describing about the people. Our focus is more on the assets that we're looking to acquire and how do we utilize that. So a lot of it has been Excel heavy, Got a really good tech team. Our engineer, he's a former tech guy, so he's always looking at cool ideas, but we're just recently bringing in like Salesforce and ThoughtTrace, and we've worked with Ashley on Tracts. And so our big thing for me is on like speed of analysis and title acquisition, looking through all that stuff. So a little bit of a different perspective than some of the other ground game deals. So it's
speed's really the name of the game when it comes to winning in the mineral space, correct? I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah. That's for someone that doesn't come from the mineral space but understands a little bit of it, to give context to anyone that may not come from that world. You have all of these fractionalized mineral interests across, farmers and just third generation families. And so you're constantly, on the phones with these people. You're meeting with the local farmer at a Stripes gas station, grabbing a coffee, trying to get a deal done. And so, especially for like bigger companies, it's like you want to be able to do this at scale and do it fast. That way you can beat out your competition to a deal. And so ripe for innovation. Over the last couple of years.
Yeah, so we've done a lot or pretty much all the same things as these guys have. I know these guys are big in GIS as well, but pushing beyond the CRMs and Excel platforms and Tracts for that matter. For me, GIS just kind of wraps it all up in a bow and makes it so that the average guy can access, understand, and execute on game plan. Because if you've got all this data in tabular format and just all sitting there on a screen to try to figure out, if you can put it on a map, most people can understand a map a lot better. And so for our buyers, whenever we can visualize everything for them, and they can in turn visualize that to the sellers, it helps. Because the seller can then see what our reservations are as to why we may be thinking about it different than the way they're thinking about it, or even educational level, just to how does a pooled unit work? What do you mean whenever I'm in this allocation well and you've got crossing multiple properties and you're only giving me a certain percentage of it? The GIS side of it, allows you to do that a little easier. Next steps in technology for me, I'd love to see just more integration between the platforms and GIS. We do it internally, but it's a huge pain. We have a lot of the APIs, all the patches, it brings everything together, but it's not easy and it's not foolproof. It's not sleek. It takes a lot of effort to keep it up and running.
Yeah, for sure. And Ricky, you're over at Apache, which I'm really curious to hear like how a large EMP like Apache thinks about land. And I know Apache historically has had large data science teams and pretty forward thinking when it comes to technology. How do y'all think about land and minerals? Like, you have Whitney over here that's like really, boots on the ground, buying royalties and minerals. And I imagine that's a different world than what an EMP like Apache does.
It is a little bit different as an operator. We did take the opportunity in 2020 when prices crashed and rigs stopped and everything kind of came to a standstill. We could really focus on our land data and try to look at where do we need to get better in terms of capturing data, how do we organize that data, and how do we use it better to make decisions. So we have a team, we have a very good IT team that our land group partners with, and they help us kind of execute on what our vision is, to just be able to take all the data that we've acquired as an operator over the years when we acquire these assets, with varying levels of accuracy and level of detail, trying to put it all together get it cleaned up so we have a consistent data model that we can use for decision making go forward. Similar to like you mentioned with GIS, we try to focus on what's important, what do we need to capture, and then let's get it on a map and let's make it easily reportable.
So I want to understand like the current tech stack that people use. So it's great hearing that y'all build out on Salesforce, understand that well. Either Mac or Ashley, I'm going to give you like 30 seconds to plug Tracts here and actually explain what Tracts is and how it fits in the workflow of land and title, so that I have I've known you guys for years, still don't understand exactly how it works. So like explain it to me like, I don't know shit. I'm giving you a slam dunk here to plug yourself, so don't roll your eyes at me.
I'll follow on to talk about how we go from Tracts.
I feel like they might be able to do a better job of explaining.
Yeah,
Tracts.
go ahead.
So we've got around 10 in-house title landmen. All they do is run blanket title. We've had a strategy in the powder where we decide where we want to buy based on geology, operators, all those filters. Drill timing, and we decide, okay, we want to run this title. And so we've actually ran in the Powder River Basin about 650,000 acres of net acres of title.
Wow.
So we've got we have the biggest title database without a doubt. But so these guys run a tract or a section, which is so great about Tracts is you actually can run a section at a time versus a parcel or a tract at a time. So they're running an entire section at a time, patent to present. When they finish that and it's reviewed by one of the senior title landmen, then it gets exported via the flat report is supposed to. So it gets exported via what Tracts calls a flat report, which is basically a deck of all your owners. So that immediately gets uploaded to Salesforce in our system. If there's an existing account, which there's a lot of common title in the powder, so they're most of the time when we're uploading something, we already have an account. That tract gets added to that account. If it's a brand new account that Salesforce doesn't recognize, it automatically creates a new account and flags it as this account doesn't have, an assigned buyer, and we immediately assign that out to a buyer.
Got you. How do y'all see Tracts fitting in?
So I'll take. We're more reactive than proactive compared to Whitney. We bring Tracts into the mix whenever we're ready to buy something. We focus on the Permian Basin. We have tax rolls to work from, and we don't have to go out and find the owners ahead of time. There's lists of them, and it also helps. We've just been buying there for so long that our name is well recognized. So we get a lot of phone calls in, just natural inbounds. We send out a lot of letters. We get people calling in. We have buyers that are actively pursuing leads. But once a deal actually comes to a point of PSA signature, that's when we bring in Tracts. That's whenever we leverage the software to allow our title team to work faster and be more accurate and deliver a product that we can then interpret. We have a way that we export the same report she's talking about, flat ownership report, and I've got a way that I can copy whatever lines I want and then go into my system and do a shortcut, and it pastes everything in and populates my system. So it's then there for me to continue down my acquisition path, in our own homegrown system. We're reactive to it, but still get the benefits of the time savings and the accuracy aspect that you just don't get out of the average landman running title on one of your yellow legal pads and then taking that over and putting into Excel or a Word document or whatever other sort of reporting you're requiring.
Yeah. So enough plugging Tracts.
Thank you.
Good, thanks.
Thank you. I really want to hear about.
I got to tease Ashley because so Ashley's been pursuing me with Tracts for I don't know how long now.
Since before your company started.
Yeah. So he
finally 2 years, 3 days. He's got
36 out of 8.
Yeah.
Well, the poor guy. So the poor guy. We finally do a deal. We finally use it. I really liked it. And then the next couple transactions have been relative valuation. So, Brigham doing a merger, it's a relative valuation deal. So you're not running title. So I'm like, sorry, we are buying an 83,000 NRA deal and I'm not running title.
Yeah.
So,
just wait till one of these guys busts it.
But actually,
using Tracts.
But I will say I like it. I think Ashley's onto something as far as technology relative to doing a better job in building the database for title and building I've been saying it internally with my company. The reason I want to use Tracts more is that oftentimes as land guys, what we do is we go out there, we get title done, we get these abstracts or these MORs, and they become stagnant. They go into a digital file, and we don't go then pull those files and then bring them forward. But Tracts kind of solves for that. Like you go back and you're not constantly rerunning title. Yeah. That's probably the biggest area of inefficiency, I think, within probably the industry. Maybe a big statement, but the industry has been so good in advancing in other technologies, relative geology, engineering.
Yeah.
But on the title side, we kind of just do the same thing that we've all been doing.
Yeah.
And as an operator, we have that same issue. We have a lot of title data, a lot of things that we've paid for in the past, and it's just difficult for us to consume it when we need it.
Yeah.
So having a place to house all that information, house all that data. So, if we need additional title work done, let's just take it point forward. Let's not recreate the wheel and do stuff that we've already done. So definitely being able to have that easily accessible and consumable is big for us.
Yeah. It's hard to convince a landman, though, that the one that ran it before him did it right.
Well, of course. They all tell you they would trust it, but
we laugh. Yeah, but that's
it absolutely is. Yeah. I mean, Ashley and I have talked about the grading of documents. If there was a way to say that 1,500, whatever, however many land guys have already looked at this document and said, this is the answer. There's no need for you to look at it again. Stop looking at it, and have that pre-interpreted deal to feed in, and it's over with. And you'd be down to a handful of documents in each county that actually need interpretation.
Yeah, I think actually one of my first interactions with Ashley was back in 2017 or 18 on LinkedIn. I was talking about what blockchain could do for land and title. It only made so much sense to me that, hey, you have these, you have a database of the entire powder, and you look at the process, and it's like you run title over and over and over again. And my opinion, outside looking in, the only people that win in that are attorneys and brokers and, and those types, right? And I remember putting that out there, and then Ashley was like, "It'll never." You had some objection to it, and I think it was like going back retroactively and correcting things. And so let's talk about this. There's a few things that I want to talk about, like the future of tech and land, but let's start with blockchain applications. And will it ever happen where we can actually have title on blockchain? How do you solve this problem, this massive inefficiency in the industry where we keep doing the same things over and over again? I love how you talked about, like, we think about this when it comes to like seismic, reservoir engineering, things like that. But in land and title, just like there hasn't been a ton of innovation outside of, some few companies like Tracts building some SaaS platforms, building out custom software on Salesforce. So let's start with blockchain, and then I want to get into AI after that.
I think for blockchain to work in title, everybody is going to have to be okay with sharing what they've done. So when we talk about all the title that everyone has ran, and I guarantee you, like, most of the tier 1 acreage in the whole country has been ran, right, by somebody, and yet we continue to redo it because we're not willing to share what we've done with other people. And that's something that we would need to overcome.
There's a bit of a competitive advantage to having to rerun it every time. If you're fast and good at it, or if you already have it, you have an advantage. You don't want to give that away.
It's interesting that you talk about blockchain, because I do remember our conversations in the past, and technology has improved, obviously. So I'll admit that I was probably wrong. I do think that there is going
to be... Got that on the record on the podcast.
There is going to be...
Turn the volume whenever that piece comes up.
That 2-second piece is my clip that I'm posting out.
Colin was right. No, there definitely will be at some point some kind of move to a technology like blockchain for this problem. I don't necessarily... I do think a consensus will be needed, but not like how we envision it today. We're working with a blockchain project right now, kind of helping them, and they're trying to help us kind of solve the same problem. It does matter, you need people to agree on what a document says, right? But if you can get enough people to agree on it and then count on it, the network itself could self-insure the result.
Yeah.
And so and just to be clear, in real estate, the big four for title insurance, they already have a private blockchain. They share ownership data. So if you need a title opinion on your house, right? If you need title insurance, the policies of 99.9% of all policies have been underwritten before, and any one of the big four title companies can just access the network, and then it costs them $10 to clear title on average.
Yeah, that leads me to an interesting question because, to Whitney's point, you have to have consensus. Everyone has to be comfortable with sharing their data. Adam, you said that there is a little bit of a competitive advantage of having that title already ran, or if you're fast at it. The question is there a value proposition that says, hey, all the mineral funds and operators, it's actually going to save you costs in the long run if we all share the information and have this database or this blockchain where we can all interact with it and share, that it actually justifies giving up that small competitive advantage to have that gain in efficiency.
It's interesting. Sorry, I'll let somebody else talk, but that's an interesting problem that I've been working with recently. Essentially, let's say that you can no longer use that knowledge as power, as far as what am I selling? Right now, if a mineral owner goes to sell an asset to any one of these buyers, whether it's Whit, Adam, or Britton, the part of their valuation is understanding what is it that we're actually buying. But if you can remove that, then they have to be competitive on something else. They have to either know it's going to be drilled, or they have to.
That's the problem, is that I don't think that mineral will never get to that point, because leads are everything. And if we all have the same leads, then it just turns into a price competition, right? And it's already enough of a price competition. It's really about getting to that person first, or on the right day. So I don't really see.
But volume plays a piece in that too. So, thinking about Permian Basin, we all have the tax rolls, but there's so many owners out there. And so there's still, we're all out there using the same tax rolls. We're all contacting the same people, but yet I'm still able to close lots of deals every month.
I think
but there's a volume piece. Powder River, maybe not so much because you have a lot less.
It's absolutely a volume piece. What I've always said is, that mineral buying isn't really rocket science. You could break it down to statistics, just like you're saying. And the statistics are different for every basin, how many leads you need to generate to do a deal. But you could break it down to statistics by basin. Yeah. Like Adam said,
100%
how many volume do you need?
I could almost speak. Again, slightly different perspective than Adam, Whitney, and how they approach it, given our approach on acquiring. We typically are buying more from the mineral buyers on the ground game side.
Yeah.
But so two sides. One, I see about a 10% success rate is kind of what I've typically seen. I got to talk to 100. I got to look at 100 deals to get 10 done.
Yeah.
But coming back around a little bit, kind of to the point of the value of going like a blockchain, and what do we gain out of it as Landman or as an industry to go into something that's more like automated title, or more like the title insurance companies relative to real estate. For me, for my company, the cost, I'm doing the same title over and over, so that's a redundant cost. The accuracy of title and knowing that we all agree on it, because it may not be popular to say this, but one of the biggest things I've seen title loss in over the last couple of years has been around this MPRI stuff, fixed versus floating. Well, that's because one day somebody woke up and decided, well, I'm going to change the way we interpret this. And
Can you actually open up on that a little bit?
That's a whole other podcast.
And I do. You can explain the difference, but that's the biggest bust area, period.
Well, man, to go down that road, it is a big road.
Just give me the layman's terms of what's happening.
I'm trying to think how to say this.
This is how I learned shit about the industry.
There's two kinds of MPRIs.
Yeah.
There's three.
Okay. There's three.
Actually,
I'm going to name
technically, yes.
There's one that that runs with the land, which means it doesn't live and die, it's not based upon a lease rate, right? You have a 2% non-participating royalty interest. Non-participating royalty interest means that you don't participate in the lease bonuses or lease negotiations. but it's very similar to how an override works, except for it's on the minerals. So a fixed MPRI is 2% of the minerals, no matter whatever the lease is at. So if you lease at 3/16, that person gets 2%, and the mineral owner gets 16.75%. A floating is when it's actually tied to a percent of the lease rate. So it can change as that lease rate changes if it expires and you renegotiate it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's exactly. So the one is a variable versus a fixed. So one moves with the lease rate, and one is just like, this is your total percentage. And so that, depending on how it was interpreted, like most often in 1960 or 1970 when these were in vogue, it's changed, and so you lose the title. Now, again, that wasn't the point I was trying to make, as much as like going back to like more of a, the bigger title basis, like the title insurance companies in real estate, is just getting more consistency in that. For me, the advantage of being able to run title and get ahead of the next guy is, I don't get me wrong, I've used that, but it's not the same as like for Whitney and Adam. So for me, as I look at it, my big driver has been consistency and accuracy in that title. And so again, I go back to Tracts a little bit, because that's one of the solutions that Ashley's solving for, is that input and that interpretation by the Landman that screw things up and misread things or just get lazy or whatever. I mean, we all make mistakes, right? And so Ashley's program kind of helps some of that. So
Whitney, you said that you think that we'll never get to that point, of having general consensus to have title on blockchain. That was kind of back in 2018, I came to that conclusion. I'm like, hey, perfect fit for the technology, but there's too many misaligned incentives between different parties to actually make a product or a solution there. Is that...
No, I disagree with that.
You disagree? Okay. So we've actually swapped.
I'll let you go. No. I now believe that a blockchain, a known ownership world is possible. Such that even if it was wrong, it wouldn't matter. And so, before I go into that, I want to know what you guys were gonna say.
I was just gonna say the technology for blockchain and an immutable ledger, I think it lends itself perfectly to title ownership. Makes a ton of sense. There's a ton of overlap there. I would separate kind of into two different buckets. One, I don't know if we'll ever get to the point where true record title, legal ownership is tracked on a blockchain, but that's a separate discussion. I really think there's value to being able to have a blockchain that tracks it, really, even if you just call it for informational purposes. There's so many operators, mineral buyers, that we're all spending the same money for the same title in the same basins. I think there's a lot of money to be saved if you just have a common title set that people are sharing data with.
So it seems like there's just so much waste.
There's so much waste. Redundancy.
Money spent.
Yeah. I'll give you an idea of the waste. Like if Tracts were to decide to run all of the title in like a county like Martin County, that project would cost us maybe $2-3 million. But if you go to a company like, I don't want to say names, but like, a major operator that operates in that area, they might spend that every year running title.
Yeah.
And the reason is because they're punching holes. They have to exclude data. But when you decide to take on the whole county, every piece of data you analyze is, meaningful and it adds value. And so you can do it for a fraction of the cost of excluding the data. It's a pretty interesting thing, but that doesn't go to the blockchain problem. You were about to say something.
No, I was just smiling because it took me back like early in my career. I was working as a landman for Whiting Oil and Gas up in the Bakken, and we were in Mountrail County and just trying to get title, and we couldn't. And old school system, everything was paper, and so we had this broker that we paid, and they went in. Really early, right? They went in and scanned the entire courthouse. So like we paid the courthouse, we shut it down for a couple of weeks, and we were the only ones in there, scanned everything, got it on CDs. I remember getting the CDs and having put in my computer and go through the files, but it kind of just made me think
how to say you're over 40 without saying
yeah. I'm old school. Yeah.
Unfortunately, it still happens, the CDs thing.
You didn't say floppy. How to say you're over 40 but under 50.
I'm 40. I'm not.
He's in his prime.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how or what it looks like yet, but our plan has always been to actually do this and monetize our title when we feel like we've gone through the basin.
Yeah.
And that's not to say there's not opportunity left in the basin, but it's to say, you know, we've fully deployed our capital. We're happy with our position. We're ready to move on from the powder. You know, we will monetize that title. You know, and we'll
you
work
have a
with,
data set that's
yeah,
valuing
we'll
it,
work,
right? Yeah.
We've
Are you
kinda
guys selling
talked-
that data?
We will. We've talked to Ashley.
Do you want
know,
the
about
powder?
Oh,
this
no,
for-
I just was curious.
long term. That's a strategy. I mean, when we say, okay, we're
Lots of
done,
people
we're
ask.
good.
We could sign
But do we
Right
do
here.
We're
are there
good in the
previous
powder.
transactions where that has occurred?
We'll sell the section. We'll sell title probably section by section. I don't know. Ashley's gonna help.
I want to broker
Is
a
there-
deal between
But-
Apache and you
Well,
right here on the
You
podcast.
All of a sudden, Apache
had
starts
Permian
talking
data-
about-
Bring over the bottle of whiskey. We're about to make this happen.
If you had a Permian data set, we could maybe.
I know you could sell it. Too.
I know somebody.
Yeah, I mean, I'm, you know, it's funny because I feel like we've got better title than a lot of these operators. You know, EOG will, you know, file some pooling order that's wildly off, and we're like, do you want us to send you the title for this section? Because I don't know who ran this, but
Thanks for
it's
calling
like
out
about
EOG,
4
not
years old.
Apache.
Yeah.
He's over here
not a
sweating
customer
bullets.
currently. EOG, not a customer.
So,
currently.
you know, the common theme that I've heard from all of you is removing friction from the process, increasing efficiency. You brought up, Britton, you brought up ThoughtTrace, which I thought was interesting. Before we started recording, when you brought up ChatGPT and what OpenAI is doing. You know, it's interesting. Actually, a few weeks back, one of my friends that runs a large commercial real estate fund out in California sent out a tweet. He's like, hey, can't you use OpenAI or ChatGPT to pull information out of leases? And my response was, yeah, there was a company, ThoughtTrace, that did this same exact thing for oil and gas leases. And so I spent a lot of my time around machine learning models and AI and what it can do. And I think that there's a huge use case here. Not only, you know, pulling information out of the leases to make that process of, you know, running title faster, but it can be used across the whole value chain. Let's start off with you, Britton, and how you guys use ThoughtTrace and what it does, and then let's just all dive in on that topic.
You know, it's actually interesting. It's more than just ThoughtTrace. Like our whole company, we came to this conclusion a couple of years ago. And Jarrett Marcoux, who's our EVP of engineering, he came from the tech industry, super smart guy. Like, yes, I'll pop for him here. So hopefully he'll buy me a beer later. No, he had this idea. We kind of realized is that amongst land, finance, land accounting and engineering, we were constantly working on different well lists. And at the end of the day, it became a point of miscommunication within the company. And so we brought in a third party and we did what we called our master data management program. And we had this third party just like start pulling data from all these different data sets that we use, Bolo, you know, Combo Curve, IHS, I forget, our GIS. I'm probably misnaming some of those, but I don't think we use Combo Curve in that. But anyways, we were pulling all that together and we were using it to check APIs against NRIs and make sure, you know, everybody's using the same well list throughout the organization. That was a huge step in the right direction for us in efficiencies. So then the next step was how do we start tying wells to the minerals and leases and get all that data to where it's not just compartmentalized, but actually communicating throughout the whole organization. So we just did the ThoughtTrace contract, so I'm still figuring it out right now. I can't tell you that it's working really well yet, but in theory, I like the concept. And ultimately, it's going in and helping pull key information from leases. You know, we can go in, we manage over 5,000 leases on our assets. So to be able to go and look at something like cost-free royalties or paying and producing quantities, and then compare that against the wells and the operators, and then go out and talk to these operators and say, hey, you know, your wells aren't performing. We need to talk about this lease, that kind of.
Yeah.
And I've been doing that, and it's been successful.
That's very
so
cool.
yeah,
You know,
that's
I
how we're
remember
using technology.
what was ThoughtTrace's name when they first came out?
Agile.
Yeah,
Insights.
that's right. Yeah, and I remember like one of
But
the
did you know
biggest-
that they were a 20-year-old company?
No, they've been
Yeah.
around for a long
Yeah.
time. But I remember when I first met them, I don't know, 2018 probably. Their biggest problem in oil and gas was that they'd go to deploy their technology, and a lot of leases are still, you know, on paper and filing cabinets, and they're like, well, we can't deploy any AI on analog filing cabinets, and so you know that was always a problem for them in the early stages or back then, and so it's pretty cool hearing, you know, actual mineral funds and operators starting to be able to use it and deploy it.
we've worked with them at Apache for a number of years now, and that was our big first step. Just get every lease digitized, get it in ThoughtTrace, get it through the OCR, get it available to start pulling data out of it. I think with the land data, the big thing is it's unstructured data. It's not neat numerical decimal. Right. It's you can say the same thing 100 different ways. It's not clean buckets. So it allows us for a number of key provisions in leases. At Apache, we have almost 30,000 active leases. Let's get 85% accuracy on a question.
You just one-upped me on the lease count. I get
it. He's sixth up, dude.
If I could snap my fingers and get 85% accuracy overnight, that's a huge value to me. Now, there are certain lease provisions. I need 100% accuracy. I can't rely on just the data extract, but it's a huge step in the right direction, and we are working with them to try to build direct integration into our land system to say, hey, half of our key lease provisions we can source directly from ThoughtTrace. Nobody has to look at it. The other half, we can use that to get, from, A to P, and then it's got to go to Z from there. The human can pick it up here and just take it to the final destination. But I think it's a huge step in the right direction, being able to not fully automate, but being able to really cut down the cycle time on lease interpretation.
Yes, kind of sounds like 80-20 principle for you, right? Like if you can get 80% accuracy with little effort, then it's probably worth it for you. Except
there's a lot of questions where 85% accuracy like that, perfectly acceptable. There are some where it's not, and it's the land, at least the land folks that I work with. Sometimes it's like it's a twisting their arm a little bit. Hey, we don't have to have 100% accuracy. We're just trying to get the idea of question X, whatever it might be. But it's a huge step in the right direction. The further we can go there, the more automation we can build out, the better off everyone else is going to be.
Yeah. Whitney, you brought up ChatGPT earlier, so I know you're at least thinking about how machine learning plays a part in y'all's process. You want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, we've always been excited about the prospect of AI for running title. Ashley and I have been talking about this for years, and when I brought it up to him, he was already, of course, working on it and thinking about it. When this was,
it's kind of his job, right?
Yeah, this was like in 2018, though. It's like, I have this great idea, and he was like, "I'm working on it." I was like, "Oh,
we're 1 month from release."
But running, it's on the roadmap. Running title, it's just whether in the Rockies or Texas, you're chaining title from patent all the way forward to present, and it's it's a robot or AI could do that. You're looking for, the grantor of one deed all of a sudden, or the grantee of one deed all of a sudden appears, as a grantor of another deed, and you chain so on and so forth. In places like Appalachia, where they actually refer to the last, like the previous deed book page, you actually can run, the most present deed backwards. But you could do the same thing and chain that backwards through a bot looking for that reference of that previous book page. And so we've always been really excited about that prospect, when the time comes where you can really run a section of title or a parcel via, some sort of AI. And I know Ashley's been making huge strides in trying to figure out how to do that. But, that's kind of, I think, the next step beyond Tracts. Tracts was a huge step forward in the evolution of running title. And I think the next step forward is incorporating AI in some sort of fashion. And so those companies that aren't even on Tracts yet, are just going to be totally left behind once the industry continues to evolve.
Thank you.
I just got an idea about how I'm going to beat all y'all in the mineral game. I'm going to go set up 2,000 AI bots, just call mineral owners, just go down the tax rolls.
That's being done.
We'll make
that was 3 months ago.
That was on the roadmap.
You can probably
already.
Tell by the tone, whether or not you should just hang up. Right?
It's like the pause. Hello?
I would think it's those calls I get from insurance. Like, your car insurance. Nope, it's a mineral salesman.
It's like all the mail outs. Like, even as a minerals company, I get a ton of mail outs, and you're like, really, guys? Like,
so someone on Twitter had built a bot, and it utilized the last model as GPT-2, and me and like 9 other people were the inputs, or tweets were the inputs. This fucking bot was scary how much nuance it had about energy policy in the energy industry in its tweets. And that was like my first experience with GPT a couple of years ago. And I was like, there's no way this isn't just some person behind an account making them. And so I think it's actually really like scary when you think about that. Have y'all seen the movie Megan that just came out?
Oh no.
Oh,
I
dude.
saw the cover of it looks scary enough that I'm just avoiding the movie.
So like it tries to be a horror movie, but it's all about AI. And the scary thing about it is AI is already at that point. So highly recommend checking it out. We're gonna have a bunch of like AI Landman bots running around. You're gonna go to your courthouse. There's gonna be a 4-foot Landman doll there running title. So
Ashley and I played with Chat GPT.
3.5.
Which is going to be so hard for the industry to adapt to because you have, GPT or GTP, gathering transportation processes. Like,
I actually love that because I hate acronyms with a passion, and the energy industry is the worst when it comes to acronyms.
So I'm talking to her about it. She's like, why is this important? And I'm like,
he's like,
what?
Well, remember back in the day, like making tech, you talk about APIs, and there's a big conflation between numbers and
the amount of times I've had to explain the difference. It's a little embarrassing.
It had just really made headlines when we were talking about it, and he was like, "Yeah, I mean, read about the Chat GPT," and I was like, Why are you talking about deducts right now? I was like, what are you talking about? Because I was asking him, if he had any ideas how to do something. It was the same thing of looking for cost-free, language and both our leases and the source overrides. And, Ash was like, give me 10 minutes. Got one of his developers online. We did a Zoom and they ran through a lease that I knew had cost-free language in it. And we just asked, is this lease exempt from costs? And it goes, basically, yes, and spits out, like, word for word, the deducts of this thing is,
And
the
where
cost
it
that
was.
it's exempt
It's
from,
like in Exhibit
where it's
A,
located.
Section
I was
1,
like,
Section
oh
2.
my
Without-
God.
It's incredible.
No fine tuning.
Yeah.
I actually saw an interesting stat just a few hours ago that Stack Overflow, which if you don't know Stack Overflow, a community platform for software developers, their traffic is down 12% since ChatGPT got released because developers are going to ChatGPT for their answers. So
I read something similar, so I just tried it, Excel formula. So, give me an Excel formula that does this. And it was, wow, that'll do it. Exactly.
My actually favorite use case of using ChatGPT was Julie in the office had it write a story with the Friends cast about working on a drilling rig. And it was so damn good. Like, I'm sitting there reading the transcript laughing. I'm like, how does it? Yeah. So if y'all are actually using it for like, things with purpose, we're using it for shit posts and things like that.
We played around with it at the office for the first time. And the first question we asked was, explain a Pew clause to me in layman's terms. And it was surprisingly good. I was really shocked.
Was it?
I was like, well,
yeah.
Or
Good to
before?
explain
Was
that.
that before or after?
this is
Right?
after
Yeah,
we
that's
talked.
I was actually-
And I
I
said
was
it to
gonna bring
everybody at
that
work.
up.
And I was
Like,
like, this
People are
It's
scared about
already
it.
accurate.
They might be able to explain
But
things
how do you
like
how do you envision
MPRIs.
implementing it? Do you envision, hey, Landman saying, hey, process this for me, or do you envision it all just like back end? What's the
longer
front
term?
end look like?
As I say, there's
I
a
would
short
love-
term and long term.
I would love to be able to focus it and have confidentiality around it that only my company can use it, but I want to focus it on our internal data sets and ask it specific questions and train it on company specific things.
The big
think
issue.
that
would be
Oh,
huge.
go ahead.
Long term, it I don't say ideally, but long term, it takes out, I think, the title Landman, right, and can chain it itself.
So you
Not
have a
chain it.
database of all the documents in a county, and then you ask it who owns the northeast quarter of Section 75.
Well, that's the question though, is can it chain it or is it just interpreting the document?
It can't
'Cause that's-
chain
Well, I think you have a, I think you have a short term
Because
and a
where
long
Ashley's
term.
going is that he's building this functionality out right now, and they're going to chain it.
No, it's different.
Wait,
It's
to
different.
Ricky's point, there's some, Sid over at Nesh has been working on ML models within EMPs to focus on internal data sets and be able to ask a question and find that information. And I think the question that we're asking here is kind of short term and long term. Like short term, yeah, you can pull information from leases, but long term, I think that there's a very short path to getting to a point where a bot can chain title and put it together.
It's a bit more complicated than that. And the reason, and it is possible, it's a bot, but a bot will have to be running different programs. So like the Chat GPT or GPT can interpret a document, right?
Yeah.
And it does an incredible job with no training. to what you were speaking to, GPT itself, because we've been playing with it for quite a while now.
And what is GPT?
So it's the
Generative pre-trained is what it stands for.
right. It's the language model that's
What's the acronym? Is what I asked.
Generative pre-trained it's a natural language processing engine. Yeah. And I hope we don't get quoted on this because somebody that knows what they're talking about is going to know
These dumbasses.
the full that's not my job. My job is to just envision the future and understand the limitations. But GPT it's a natural language engine. So it can read and interpret and understand what a document says. In our experiments, and we have fully implemented 2.0 and 3.0 on the back end of Tracts, we run all kinds of experiments. It gets really rigid very, very fast, which means the outcome is not reliable the more you kind of train it.
Yeah.
So we're really trying to flex with that. But let's say you could interpret all the documents. It's not that bot that's going to be able to chain title. You then need to have some kind of algorithm to do the math. And the bot needs to have access to that. And so that's what we're doing.
You know anybody that has that algorithm?
There's a company.
There's a company working on it.
It's called Tracts, and we do it right now for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds.
But like
of
you already
users
see that like stacking different. So this is
thousands.
gonna be a very rudimentary example, but I had ChatGPT. I said, "Hey, create me a song about fracking with Drake's lyrics," and it did that. And then I took it over to another AI program, and I had Drake's voice rap those lyrics. So I made an entire Drake. I overlaid a beat on it, and I made a Drake song about rapping. And so I think that you'll start seeing that where, I had to do that on a manual basis, but there's no reason that AI can't put all of those things together.
Yeah, but
driven by algorithms.
The way it's built, maybe right now is the thing. It's just like the problem you guys have today in your business. You have all these cool tools, and none of them talk to each other. It's when you're able to combine the AIs and the scripts and the robots that we'll start to see some stuff. So how are we using GPT at Tracts? We have this new hot tub icon that's coming out soon. So when you drop, and the reason we chose a hot tub is because it's like you can just chill in a hot tub and it's going to interpret the documents for you, right? So you drop the documents in, you hit the hot tub, and it will interpret the document for you in seconds.
So
And
it's a hot tub come with that contract.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
You've been spending
For
too
you,
much time
yes.
at BAM.
It depends
That's
on
exactly what I was about to say.
What?
It has nothing to do with
Nothing to
time
do with
machine.
it. Should though. That's true.
Ashley's just daydreaming about being in the hot tub and Banff. He's like, you know what, hot tub icon.
Yeah. So that's actually our developer Adam came up with the hot tub idea. So what are we using GPT for? We're currently using it to interpret documents for our title notes product, and then we have Landman, go over the interpretation. The first iteration that customers like you guys will experience, essentially, we can interpret the documents as you upload them. We already OCR everything, and then you can hit the hot tub and it'll interpret a document, or if you've prepaid for it, you can. It's not cheap, right? So you're gonna have to agree to pay, even before our costs. It's not cheap to use the ChatGPT. But another cool thing we're doing, because you were talking about mapping, is it's exceptionally good at taking out legal descriptions and parsing those into plots. So we're gonna auto deed plot. Or
What kind of legal description? Like meets and bounds?
meets and bounds. It can take now. It is not going to draw a polygon because it knows, it can figure out what the calls are pretty accurately with very little fine tuning, and the fine tuning is important. But so now you just load up a bunch of documents into Tracts, or like RWW, like we could map all of your files automatically with a click as soon as we release.
Yeah.
Same with OneMap.
So can I talk about what you and I talked about the other
Yeah.
night, the use case? So in minerals, there's two main sides of it. One is defending value, and the other is creating value. Because after you've acquired something, your job is never done because you've got to make sure the operator's paying you correctly. You're negotiating leases, so on and so forth, making sure your decimal lines up with what the operator is. But what we've been looking at is we have at this point have so many assets that probably are cost free. And how do we go back, especially, we just took over management for our private equity sponsor of two companies that were, formed and fully deployed in 2015. So we have all this data that we're not familiar with. along with Rockin' WW. Now we're trying to figure out and make sure, we've set up Salesforce to the point that now Salesforce can flag. It calculates what we should be getting paid based on our tracks in a given section. So it automatically calculates what our interest should be in a well and compares that to what we're actually getting paid. So all our accounting is done in there, all our titles in there, and then it flags it. You're not getting paid what you should be getting paid based on, on a decimal basis, right? So now the next step is, okay, where are we getting hit with deducts where we shouldn't be getting hit with deducts? And so that's what I was talking to Ashley about a couple of weeks ago was Tracts has already OCR'd all of our, information in, or all of our documents and tracks. And so basically, I can give him a list of book pages of documents in there, and he can pull those and run the chat GPT looking for cost exemptions and say, okay, here's these leases that we found with cost exemptions. And then we can obviously look at the wellbores and look at the actual pay stubs and see if we're actually, being exempt from those. And there's so much money to be clawed back, in mineral companies with deducts. Operators rarely set up, Apache.
I felt like I was getting side eye.
Maybe
Like,
different, but
Everyone looks at Ricky.
I've worked, I was on the operated side before minerals, and it is very tough and very cumbersome
Yeah.
to track deducts. I'm not hating on the operators. It's so cumbersome and it's complicated because somebody's got to pay those, right? And so then you've got to make sure that specific working interest owner is overly burdened with those deducts to offset, the cost rate. It's just complicated. So if you're a mineral company, the chances that you're actually getting paid correctly on those is probably pretty small.
Yeah.
And it's really the mineral company's job to be auditing those and find where they're not getting paid correctly. So that's kind
really
of
going to help you bring transparency into the accounting.
exactly. So that's kind of what we're focused on right now.
So we're very robust in that because we find so much money for the same reason. And again, it's not operators. It's just like, think about all these acquisitions these operators have to follow. We've seen a lot of consolidation over the last couple of years by operators. So they're all like trying to get their business in order while we're consolidating on minerals. And so it's just like all this consolidation is just hard to keep up with. But we've started using like Power BI. It's a cool tool that, that just ties in with everything. It's been a really neat thing. But I've been working with one of our internal guys that he kind of heads up the Power BI stuff for our company. And him and I have been talking a lot about the fact that the real solution that I kind of feel like I keep hitting a roadblock with is that there's nobody that's looking at the full workflow process of a minerals company. Everybody's looking to solve engineering, geosciences, land, accounting, all these different pieces, but nobody's saying, here's the workflow process. Like, how do we get all these tools? There's a lot of cool tools out there. And a lot of guys, really smart people, solve them for these one-off situations, but nobody's like putting all these pieces together. Like Tracts is a great tool, but it doesn't do me any good on the minerals management as far as getting the checks read. And managed.
Every big company has tons of data silos that you're trying to break down, group the data together so you can get the full picture end to end. I think it's challenging.
It is challenging.
We recognized it in, I guess I was 17 or 18, and we started building out our own stack that does, at this point, it does 80+% of everything. There was a time where we subscribed to one of the accounting softwares and all this. We had Landman and all these. And now that's all wiped out. We've got our deal. We've got our engineering stuff, through like Aries and Combo Curve. ArcGIS is still outside and Tracts is outside. But we've built everything else inside. Now we've spent a lot of money doing that. Spent a lot of time doing that. But we were able to do like what you're talking about. Whenever a division order comes in, and all you have to do is type in that well name, and then the system tells you, here's what you own in that well from these various owners, and here's your decimal, and those numbers should match up. And 90% of the time they do. There's always, that's why we have our jobs. We have to defend our title. And then we go and figure it out and make adjustments however needed, whether it's on the operator side because they don't know what's going on, or it's an error on our side because we didn't have it in Tracts. We get it corrected, and then it moves through the system and goes into the revenue management side. But the communication between the pieces was horrible. Whenever we had the chunks, we had to get away from it. And at the time, you're right. And I feel like there's somebody that's working towards it, but no one's there yet. So it's a matter of still either build it yourself or try to figure out how to make it all communicate.
Right. Yeah. And I think the other thing too, like Apache versus the mineral guys, right? Like I came from the operator side as well. I spent most of my career in the E&P side and then switched over to minerals. I was like, oh, this would be a piece of cake, right? Like, whoa. Yeah. No, this is not a piece. Minerals is a very different world, even though it's all tied, but it's just the thought process. There's a lot of carryover, but there's still a completely different way you have to think through that thought process. Yeah. So the tool that works for a minerals company is not the same tool that works for an operator. And so for the last several years, we as the mineral guys have been making the tools that have been developed for the operators work for minerals. And so that's been a challenge to overcome too.
What's funny is as an operator, we are a big mineral owner. We've acquired some things throughout the years and we're still trying to get our hands around it. We've made big strides in the past couple of years, but that has definitely been we had to have a focused effort to kind of clean all that up and get our hands around what do we own and how to manage that like a mineral company.
Yeah.
I think the mineral side when it comes to land is much more technologically advanced than the operator side because competition breeds efficiency. And, the mineral side has gotten so competitive and it's also brought in folks outside the industry that came in with a different perspective, right? Mm-hmm. Like some guys from Wall Street, or wherever, else they were investing using different technologies and kind of implemented new things that I think, kind of caught on and, we started thinking about things differently, after having conversations with people and kind of opening up like, okay, well, this doesn't exist, but we could create it. We don't have to live within the box of those few land platforms out there. We can actually, build what, we can dream of.
I love it. So we have to wrap up this podcast because we got a party to get to tonight,
which you're all invited to.
I have one departing question. This is rapid fire. Something that if I have a bunch of land and title people in the room, I got to ask: does Landman stand for man as in male, or is it land manager? I need to get to the.
Oh, interesting.
Stands for land manager.
I've heard it called land manager, but I also know it was years ago the APL went around and asked all the ladies too, and they did this thing, and everybody agreed that's the title. It's just landman, right?
Yeah,
it's
land manager to me. I think coming from the operator side is totally different than a landman. A land manager is a person at a mineral company that really is a manager over the land department.
Yeah,
in some.
But where the term derived, I'm not sure. I never thought of it.
There's multiple types of landman. There's title landman. Mm-hmm. There's operational landman, right? That are out the operators or surface landman. So there's all sorts of different tiers of what a landman means.
Way to create conflict.
Well, landman is gender neutral as far as I've seen it.
I know how to ask good questions.
Absolutely.
So the problem is if you make it a gender thing, land woman just doesn't roll off the tongue like land man does.
I don't like that. Like, why do you got to separate me from the boys? I just want to be.
No, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm. Yeah, I agree. So yeah, We'll leave that one. We'll chalk it up to undecided as always. But everyone, I appreciate y'all coming on the show. This is fun. We got to do more of these
make it a NAPE tradition.
Yeah,
we'll do it at Mark too.
So everyone, hope you have a successful week for NAPE. You're energized now. You may not be energized by the end of the week. You busted into the whiskey. Got the week started. So. If you're listening, you enjoy this show, share it with your friends. If you're like Chuck Yates and you want to become a lease buster in your spare time, he's gonna be taking notes, listening to Britton talk earlier. He's like, oh yeah, we got floating variable.
We call them triggers.
Yeah. I'll keep an eye out for Chuck.
So make sure to give the podcast 5-star review if you listen on Spotify or Apple. Share with a friend, and we'll see you next episode.
Thank you, Colin.
Thank you.
Thank you.